Star Wars 7x7 episode 2321. Today, it's here, it's official, it has finally been released from a certain point of view for The Empire Strikes Back, and this is today's non-spoiler review. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So, from a certain point of view for The Empire Strikes Back is out, 40 stories celebrating the 40th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back, and quickly I do just want to say thank you so much to Del Rey for sending me a copy of the book to review in advance. You know, just the other day we were talking about The Mandalorian and about the return to the storyline from Return of the Jedi and how maybe that wasn't necessarily the best choice for The Mandalorian, or at least that's just one way that I was looking at it, because it's not necessarily moving forward with Star Wars storytelling. Yes, it's kind of cool to close the loop on a story, but there is some value to the mystery of it. And yet, I think the things that I'm about to say can exist in the same universe. You know, one of Star Wars' charms is the fact that it goes through and details every last bit of information. But, you know, there are limits. Like, right, Yoda, we don't have all the information about his species, and it's great that that's the case. But there are so many other background characters that we get information about and we learn all of these incredible details about. I think that's really the difference ultimately, is that there are some just broader story ideas that are left to remain a mystery in some cases, and that's great. And there are other things where things are given to you down to the specific details, and that's great too. And that's what we're getting basically with the From a Certain Point of View short stories. We are getting deeper details into the Star Wars galaxy, and not necessarily the kinds of details that go into places that we wouldn't want them to go. But it isn't necessarily just about the small details and the brief characters like Willrow Hood, for example, who gets his own story as part of this, and a rather surprising one at that. It's both the combination of characters that you are familiar with and characters that you've never heard of who are essentially having a brush with greatness, if you will, in these stories. And it features multiple genres as well. So that's one of the other great things about Star Wars, the fact that from the start, it was a multi-genre melange, if you will. It was one big crockpot full of different movie genres mixed into one great stew. And that, I think, also is just one of the things that I love about Star Wars over Star Trek. Still enjoy Star Trek stuff, but generally speaking, Star Trek kind of is what it is and stays in its lane, whereas Star Wars just does so many different things. As for the short story collection itself, like I said, a mix of genres, a mix of characters that you know and characters that you have never met and will only meet in this short story collection because of some brush with greatness that they had. I will say I felt like it was mostly great in the collection of short stories. Yeah, it felt a little uneven in some places, but 40 stories, it's not always going to be perfect. One thing that is perfect, though, and I'm going to read this straight from the book, it says, all participating authors have generously forgone any compensation for their stories. Instead, the proceeds will be donated to First Book, a leading nonprofit that provides new books, learning materials, and other essentials to educators and organizations serving children in need. To further celebrate the launch of this book and both companies' long-standing relationships with First Book, Penguin Random House has donated $100,000 to First Book, and Disney Lucasfilm has donated 100,000 children's books valued at $1 million to support First Book and their mission of providing equal access to quality education. That is absolutely unanimously awesome. And to learn more about their organization, you would go to firstbook.org. That's going to be the public service announcement for this episode. One last thing, which is just to flag a couple of authors that did some amazing things, and we'll talk a little bit more deeply about the collection as we proceed through the week. But particularly to Alexander Freed and Kevin Scott, Their stories definitely go against the type that I have in my head for them. Alexander Freed being the military sci-fi writer of Shadowfall and Battlefront Twilight Company, for example, at least in the Star Wars realm, and Cavan Scott for Dooku Jedi Lost. I know that he has done other lighter things, but I had not really encountered much of that stuff, but both of them writing stories, at least in my head, that went against the type that I associate with them and did fantastically well, which I shouldn't be surprised. They're both talented writers. And also one that I never would have expected to be as amazing as it was, or at least as amazing of a subject matter as it was, let alone what she did with it. But Catherine Valenti, who did This Is No Cave, which is the story about the Exogorth. So cool and amazing, and also kind of makes you think a lot differently about the Exogorth story that's in the Legends of Luke Skywalker book as well. It makes you consider that in a whole new light too. But oh man, to get the Exogorth story and to do what she did with it was just absolutely fabulous. So yeah. And there's great stuff in here. And again, we'll talk more about it as we go through the week. But for now, that is going to do it for this episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for it, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the world you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2020 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.